Good morning, everyone. I'm surprised to actually see more faces than I thought. I know many people enjoyed the party last night, so thanks for everyone who showed up. We'll try to make it energized. The last couple of days, I was going back and forth on how do I set the scene for this conversation? Because Africa's story is a story of ambiguity, which, to be honest, most stories are. But for people, it's usually quite hard to deal with that. It's hard to see that there are challenges and opportunities at the same time. This morning, I was running late, so I took an Uber here. I live in Munich. And I was sitting in the car, and then I started talking to my Uber driver. And he's from Nigeria. And I was talking to him about the panel, and I was asking him, why did you leave? What makes you come here, and would you want to go back? And he said, I left because it's very hard to get a job. It's very hard to get a job that matches my skills and my talent. But it's also very hard here because I do miss my family, I do miss my country. And whenever I go back, I feel like this is the place I should be. The energy that I feel when I'm at Lagos is unmatched to what I see here. There are young people all around me. They have talent, they have skills, they want to work, they want to make something out of their lives. There is music, there are resources, there's a sense of future. And so I think that really captures the story that we're very often seeing, right? We have a continent with 1.4 billion people now that is going to double by 2050. That means every fourth person on the planet will be African. I want that to settle in, right? Every fourth person on the planet is going to be African. So Africa will play a role in our future. And AI will play an even major role in shaping that future. And I'm going to start off directly with my fellow panelist here, Yasmin. Yasmin, we will need to add 800 million jobs by 2050 to provide jobs for kind of Africa's growing population. At the same time, 800 million people, everyone who knows some numbers, that's more than Europe's population. That's a huge potential. What are your thoughts on how AI will shape that development going forward?
Thank you, and also thank you for sharing that beautiful story. It reminds me of a lot of the work I'm doing. So good morning, everyone. I think Franziska just gave us a few nice stats, 1.4 billion, for example, population size of Africa. I might add one or two. One is, interestingly, the African continent today, the whole continent, has less GDP size than Germany, which is quite mind-boggling if you think about it, given that our population here in Germany is much smaller. The interesting thing is that African businesses are not expanding their workforce fast enough to absorb the number of people that are entering the job market every day. And often people think, oh, it's because they don't have access to finance. Now, access to finance is still a big topic, and I know Euler is going to speak a bit to that maybe, but nowadays, CEOs, when you ask them, why are you not growing, why can't you grow faster, they will often say, actually, I can't find the talent to grow. Now, that is really weird, though, because of what Franziska just said, isn't it? Because there's so many people looking for work. The big thing in Africa when it comes to the talent market and job creation really is that you have a total mismatch very often between what companies are looking for and what the skills are that people are coming out of school or university with. And that's where I see the biggest opportunity in AI, actually, because AI can now help us to catalyze how we upskill workers in Africa. We can actually create super workers in Africa that can finally catalyze the growth of African companies faster, and maybe also in the world, because we are all looking for more workers, aren't we? And that's what I'm doing at Africa Foresight Group. We're building the largest flexible work platform on the continent for any business in Africa to find top gig workers from any country on the continent.
Thank you very much. Euler, you're an investor. You invest in early stage companies across the continent, and you've been around for a while. You've been active for a while. And you, what are your thoughts on how AI will shape your investment thesis for the continent, but also how it will shape how companies address societal topics on the continent?
Yeah, I think AI has the potential to be transformative, and I always like to talk about this leapfrogging effect. So we've seen it in other industries. We've seen in the telecom industry, whereas most of the world at one point had large landline networks, Africa really never did. And at its peak, probably less than 2% of the population had access to a land telephone. And over the last 25 years, that's been completely transformed, and almost everybody has a cell phone. We've seen the same thing with respect to energy right now. So for the most part, Africa doesn't have large built-out national grids. Most of the energy that people are using is still less than they need, but most of the energy is coming from renewable sources. Countries like Kenya, 90% of the energy comes from renewable sources. Uganda, same thing. Other countries are following their path. And that energy is generated where it's needed and distributed locally. So not large national networks, but local distribution. And so AI has this potential to play a role where it can help industries leapfrog the traditional ways of doing things. And that's really where we're looking at how do we invest to capitalize on that. So you take, for example, something like healthcare or education. Those are both industries that right now, there's about 340 doctors for every 10,000 people in Europe. Across Africa, there's probably about 30 doctors for every 10,000 people. So access to healthcare, affordability, and the quality is all less than it should be. AI can transform that. And so how do you develop and invest in solutions that are able to help bring healthcare to people, higher quality, more accessible, more affordable? Education, you have a majority of the population right now living in rural areas where they may not have access to the same sort of education that someone in an urban area has access to. How can you leverage technology to improve the quality of the education that people are getting in more rural parts of the continent and urban parts of the continent so that they can catch up faster and do, as Yasmin say, be able to provide the skills needed to help fuel the growth that's needed on the continent. So those are some of the ways that we're looking at how AI can play a role.
And are there any specific examples of companies that in your portfolio where you're seeing they're really kind of like at the forefront of leveraging AI in their work?
Yeah, there's a few companies, and yesterday I was on a board call with one of the CEO for a company called FarmWorks that's based in Kenya. And she was talking about how they have now started gathering all the data that they gather every day. So they're selling produce to women that sell produce in local markets. They're collecting that, buying it from farmers, and then selling it to the market women who then sell it to the end consumer. Every day they're collecting from farmers or gathering data on what the farmer is supplying them. And then they're also gathering data about what they're selling to the market women for. And they want to be able to get to a point where from all that data, using machine learning, they can understand the dynamics of demand and where they should be pricing their products so that they can do everything more efficiently and you don't need any human intervention. So that's one solution in a more commercial setting. We have a company called Viamo that's it started off as an interactive voice response tool that you could call and follow the prompts and get the access to the information you wanted. Now, their platform is transitioning to one where you can call in. There's a bot that you can talk to and ask any question you want, and it can give you the answers to that question. And now 60% of the questions people are asking about healthcare, like, I have this illness, how do I help cure it? So those are ways that those companies are leveraging AI.
What are the languages the bot speaks? Do you know?
Yeah, right now it's mostly English. There's a few solutions where people are trying to translate that into local languages, but that's still very nascent. And I think
let's put a pin on that. I want to go back to that. But first, Daniel, you run a company in logistics. What made you build that company? I know you've pivoted. You're working with AI agents now. Tell us about your story.
Oh, yeah, thanks a lot. So our story is very interesting. So we originally started out running warehouses and running warehousing operations for some of the largest food and beverage companies in Kenya. And it was during those 4 years, and this is pre the OpenAI ChatGPT moment, where we were doing a lot of things manually, a lot of paperwork, a lot of phone calls, scanning documents, just like a lot of warehouses you would see, even in developed countries here in Germany and in the US, there's a lot of manual processes. And then during that period of time, we were thinking, well, how do we can never scale or grow such a business with manual, repetitive, labor-intensive processes. There's got to be a solution. And talk about being in the right moment at the right time. OpenAI releases ChatGPT, and all of a sudden we can see opportunities for using this type of technology to improve processes within the supply chain space. And we pivoted the company like immediately. We didn't want to wait or anything like that, because we are in a different AI era where we are seeing value as opposed to the previous AI eras where it was mainly experimental work. This time round, we're seeing real value being squeezed out of this new type of AI. And so today, at Logistify AI, we apply this type of technology to automate a lot of this manual, repetitive, labor-intensive, and honestly, work that nobody should be doing. No human should be doing. You shouldn't be standing there at the warehouse counting, every item that's going in, or reading hard copy pieces of paper and then entering that data into your ERP system like SAP. There's AI that does that. And now that frees up humans to do more valuable work, like talking to customers and growing their businesses. So that's what we're doing today. That's what we are using AI agents in the logistics and supply chain space in Africa. But we can get to talk a little bit more about the challenges in that, but that's what we're doing today.
Thank you. And I think we know a little bit in Germany about manual labor-intensive processes that no one should do by hand. So I think there's one thing or two we could learn from that. What I also find interesting when we talked yesterday is that your clients are not only in Africa, right? So you have clients in the UK and the US. And I think there's often this narrative that AI is being brought to the continent from Western countries. But we do see a story where it also happens the other way around. We already touched upon a little bit on the challenges, like to all three of you. Like, what are kind of like the key challenges that just need to be addressed and can be addressed when applying AI more broadly across the continent over the next couple of years? Whoever wants to go first, just jump in.
I think first and foremost, there's the infrastructure challenge. You need data centers. You need electricity to power those data centers. And so that's one challenge that people will have to overcome. Yasmin, again, talked about the skills. You've got to train people to be able to develop and utilize these tools more effectively. I'll let you guys share some.
Yeah, so I think more on the applications side, where for startups, we need to get value today, not tomorrow. Some of the challenges we're seeing are especially in Africa, is these models have to be designed for local contexts and local languages and local nuances. And so just getting a model from Silicon Valley and trying to apply it in Africa, it's a bit challenging. So we have to collect the data. For example, at Logistify AI, we have to fine-tune these models for the local context. For example, variability in languages, slang in different languages, how people call different things. So that's one of the challenges we have to face. And you kind of have to do that to get to real value, like 99.9% accuracy in these models. So that's something that we have to do right now, and we can't simply wait for infrastructure changes or the big changes that have to happen to enable that.
I had to think about it for a second because everything here is so much about future positive that I kind of forgot about all the challenges. But I think I'd probably say there's also a challenge of perception, maybe, and I would also say self-perception. I think whenever something big changes in the world, like it does now, humans like naturally don't really like change. We have to keep training ourselves to like change, right? And often when big shifts like this happen in the world, the narrative around Africa that we also partially create ourselves on the continent is, oh, we're not ready for that. Oh, we don't have the resources for this. Oh, we're behind compared to everybody else. But then you look at it more closely and you realize that it's maybe not completely true. Take the example of like green energy, for example. I mean, there's such a big narrative around the world now about climate and the fact that we need to be green in the way we live on this planet. And people always talk about how there are places like Lagos that constantly are out of power and have power cuts. But what we don't talk about is the fact that a country like Ghana is more than 80% green energy and has been so for more than 50 years. So there's often that thing of self-perception. And now it's like, oh, AI, we're not going to catch the wave. We don't have X, Y, Z. But then I'm like, well, you know, when Microsoft started coming up with Office, we all started using it. It was okay that it didn't come from Africa, right? So can we just like drop that whole mindset of, oh, we're not ready or we don't have X and look at all the things we have. We have a great workforce that with the help of AI, could actually fill a lot of talent gaps around the world. I know how much talent challenges Germany has, for example, right? And AI could actually accelerate the ability to capture that with African talent without Africans even having to move here. There's this whole conversation about how AI could help us to surpass some of these infrastructure and power challenges because of smart energy infrastructure. So I really think that the AI opportunity, or the biggest challenge to the AI opportunity, is to recognize the opportunity and be confident about it.
Yeah. And the other things I'll add are just, so AI uses a large amount of data. Increasingly, that data is not always representative of the global population. And so ensuring that the data that we're using to build AI models is diverse. And then the commercial aspect of it, you need to find, if you build something, you need to find a way to monetize it. And I think one of the challenges some businesses are finding, especially those that are targeting consumers directly, is how do we commercialize what we're building.
I fully see that point. And I think I actually wanted to ask another question around challenges, but I felt like, kind of like with your point, we were ending on such a high note already. So I'm just curious, like if we're looking 5 to 10 years in the future, what is your vision on how kind of like AI has shaped the African continent?
For me, the biggest thing is that we have found a way to accelerate African businesses' global growth. And I think AI can play a big role in that. I mean, I work on the talent side, I'm very passionate about that, but it doesn't have to be limited to talent. We actually managed to start building generative AI for businesses that is proprietary to them. That's been very exciting. Like, we have a business in Ethiopia that has more than 5,000 employees, and we've been able to digitize all of their data from emails and all kinds of data sources that they had available in the organization to build their own GPT, basically, that is a local ChatGPT just for their organization. And that's changed so much around how they share knowledge and share ideas, etc. So I think if businesses can just embrace the trend, they can actually, as Euler said earlier, leapfrog how other family businesses around the world are operating that might be much slower in adapting to such trends. And I do think that there are a lot of hidden champions on the continent that are prone to become global champions if they have the right access to tools and they're ready to do that. So I hope in 10 years you know some African business brands that have taken the world by storm.
Yeah, so hopefully everybody will know Logistify AI.
Exactly.
Yeah, but so I think in short term and even in the long term, what we're seeing is the ability for startups to do more with less because of AI, specifically with in regards to hiring talent. Previously, you probably had to hire 10 software developers, senior software developers to build out your solution. but with the help of AI and software coding agents, you can probably build out a $10 billion company or $1 billion company with just a few people, and hopefully then export that value out. And maybe that's also something that Europe and Germany are also thinking about while building their startups in here, is that all of a sudden we're able to build a lot of startups, solve a lot of problems with less resources.
But our people need jobs, eh?
There'll still be jobs, but high quality jobs.
Yeah, I think there's 4 areas I'm most excited about: healthcare, agriculture, education, and regulatory. So regulatory, I think governments, for a large part across the continent, have failed their people. But I think AI solutions are going to give them the ability to provide services in a much more efficient and effective way. On the ag side, Africa's woefully unproductive relative to the rest of the world. But I think companies can start to leverage AI to find ways to provide information to farmers so that they can be more productive in terms of how the crops that they're growing, what they're growing, who they're selling it to. Education, I talked a little bit about the way software and AI can help both provide quality and also personalization in education to help improve outcomes. And healthcare, I think that's going to be the biggest game changer. The way people are able to access healthcare. A couple of years ago, we looked at a solution where you could cough into your phone and it could tell you what respiratory illness you had. You could take a picture of your skin and it will tell you what skin disease, what skin issue you had. At the time, it was 83% effective for Caucasian populations and only about 60% effective for colored skin. With more data and more training, that's going to be more effective, and someone can diagnose an illness rather than for a few dollars or tens of dollars, it'd be a few cents. And that's just going to transform the way people are able to get access to the care that they need.
Thank you very much. I'll just wrap it up here. I mean, like what I'm seeing here on the stage, like this is what makes me extremely optimistic about how AI will shape Africa's future in the next 5 to 10 years. And I think this is something that we would have not foreseen like 15 to 20 years ago. How it will again kind of like enable the continent to leapfrog certain developments. So I just hope like everyone here in the room has not thought about Africa before. Please spend some time. There's like a new episode from The Economist just coming out last week. Read up on Africa. Think about how it will impact your business, what you can do to get involved in its future. AI will massively shape it in a positive way. And thank you very much to my panelists.
Thank you.